You are not your thoughts. If you were, you would have no control. Most people live trapped inside their own minds, believing every thought they hear, obeying every emotion they feel. This audiobook will show you the truth. Thoughts are not commands, they are noise. Once you stop identifying with them, you regain control. This is where mental freedom begins. Chapter 1: Your thoughts are not facts. Your thoughts are not facts. That's the foundation. That's the truth most people never learn. A thought can feel urgent. It can feel loud. It can feel convincing. But none of that makes it true. Most people suffer because they believe everything they think. They never question it. They never pause. They obey. A thought says, "You're not good enough." They accept it. A thought says, "Something is wrong." They panic. A thought says, "You should be afraid." They freeze. That's not intelligence. That's conditioning. You have a choice. That's the key. The moment a thought appears, you can either believe it or observe it. Most people believe it automatically. They mistake mental noise for reality. But a thought is just a mental event. It comes. It goes. And if you don't feed it, it dies. You don't need their permission, not even your own mind's permission, to live clearly. Think about this. If every thought were true, you'd be in constant danger. Contradictory thoughts appear all day. Fearful thoughts. Doubting thoughts. Irrational thoughts. If you were your thoughts, you would be chaos. But you're not. That's the key. A thought is not an order. It's not a command. It's not a prophecy. It's information. And most of it is useless. The disciplined mind does not react. It evaluates. An anxious thought appears. You don't run. You don't fight. You observe. A self-critical thought appears. You don't collapse. You don't argue. You observe. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. That's not weakness. That's mastery. Most people live inside their thoughts like prisoners. They argue with them. They negotiate with them. They obey them. Strong people step back. You have a choice. Here's where transformation begins. The moment you stop treating thoughts as facts, emotional control starts to return. Your heart rate slows. Your reactions soften. Your clarity increases. Not because life changed, but because your relationship with your mind changed. It's not about eliminating thoughts. That's a mistake. It's about discipline. It's not about silence. It's about authority. Your mind can speak, but it does not decide. That's the key. Most people are exhausted not because life is hard, but because they argue with their own minds all day. They replay conversations. They imagine disasters. They predict rejection. None of that is happening. It's mental theater. And you're not required to attend the show. You have a choice. Here's a practical instruction. The next time a thought creates tension, do not respond immediately. Do not analyze it. Do not correct it. Label it. Say internally, "This is a thought." That's it. No story. No judgment. This single act breaks identification. And when identification breaks, control returns. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need your mind's approval to stay grounded. That's discipline. It's not about intelligence. It's about restraint. Most people think freedom comes from thinking better thoughts. It doesn't. Freedom comes from not obeying every thought. That's the shift. Thoughts are suggestions. You decide whether to act. A thought says, "Avoid this." You pause. You choose. A thought says, react now. You pause. You choose. You have a choice. That's the key. This chapter is about one truth. Your thoughts are not facts. And until you understand that, nothing changes. You don't need to win arguments with your mind. You need to stop participating. That's where power begins. You are learning to step back, to observe, to regain authority. And now that you understand this, we move deeper. You've learned to stop believing every thought. Now it's time to understand what the mind really is. Chapter 2: The mind is a tool, not your identity. The mind is a tool. Nothing more. It was never meant to be your identity. It was never meant to run your life. Most people confuse the voice in their head with who they are. That mistake costs them everything. You hear a thought, and you say, that's me. You feel an emotion, and you say, that defines me. That's not awareness. That's fusion. You have a choice. That's the key. A tool is something you use, not something you become. A hammer does not decide what gets built. The hand does. Your mind works the same way. It produces thoughts. It scans for danger. It predicts outcomes. That's its job. But when you let the tool take control, chaos follows. Most people don't live consciously. They live mechanically. A thought appears. They react. An emotion arises. They obey. No pause. No distance. No authority. That's not living. That's being operated. You don't need their permission, including your mind's permission, to take control. That's the shift. Your mind is useful. But it is not you. That's the key. Here's the problem most people never see. The mind speaks in first person. It says, I'm afraid. I can't do this. I'm not ready. And because it uses the word I, you believe it. But that voice is a function, not an identity. The moment you stop identifying with it, power returns. You have a choice. When the mind says, I am anxious, you pause. You translate. You say, there is anxiety present. That single shift changes everything. Identity dissolves. Observation begins. It's not about denying emotion. It's about placing it correctly. It's not about suppressing thoughts. It's about hierarchy. The mind belongs below awareness, not above it. That's discipline. Most suffering comes from misidentification. People don't suffer because thoughts appear. They suffer because they believe this is who I am. That's the flaw. It's not about intelligence. It's about discipline. A disciplined person does not argue with the mind. They position it. They listen. They decide. You have a choice. Here's a real-world example. Two people feel fear before a challenge. One says, I am afraid, so I can't act. The other says, fear is present, and I will act anyway. Same emotion. Different identity. One is controlled. The other is free. That's the difference. You don't eliminate the mind. You put it in its place. That's the key. The mind is designed to warn, not to command. When you let it command, you shrink. When you observe it, you expand. This chapter demands one discipline. Stop saying, I am my thoughts. Start saying, thoughts are happening. That's not semantics. That's control. Every time you identify with the mind, you give up authority. Every time you observe it, you reclaim it. You have a choice. Here's a behavioral instruction. Throughout the day, listen to how your inner dialogue speaks. When it says I, pause. Replace identity with observation. Not I am stressed. But stress is present. Not I am confused. But confusion is present. This creates separation. Separation creates control. That's the key. You don't need permission to step out of the mind. You don't need approval to take authority over your inner world. That's discipline. The mind will resist this. It will demand attention. It will create urgency. Do not fight it. Do not argue. Observe. A tool does not need to be silenced. It needs to be directed. You are learning command. And once you stop identifying with the mind, something powerful happens. Thoughts lose weight. Emotions pass faster. Reactions soften. Not because life changed, but because leadership returned. You are not the voice. You are the listener. That's the shift. And now that you understand the role of the mind, we go deeper. You've learned that thoughts are not facts. You've learned that the mind is not your identity. Now we expose the behavior that keeps people trapped inside it. Chapter 3. Stop believing every thought. Your mind talks non-stop. Most people never question it. That's the problem. Every thought feels real. Every emotion feels justified. Every impulse feels urgent. But here is the truth that will change your life. A thought is not a command. A thought is not a fact. A thought is not you. You have a choice. That's the key. Most people live as prisoners of whatever thought appears next. They feel anxious, so they believe something is wrong. They feel angry, so they believe someone must be punished. They feel unmotivated, so they believe they should stop. That is weakness disguised as honesty. Your mind is a generator. It produces ideas, fears, memories, fantasies, and noise. And most of it is useless. You don't need their permission. Not even the permission of your own thoughts. Here's where discipline begins. Not by controlling your thoughts, but by refusing to believe them automatically. A thought says, "I'm not good enough." You don't argue. You don't react. You don't obey. You observe it. That's the key. Observation creates distance. Distance creates control. Most people think freedom comes from better thoughts. Wrong. Freedom comes from not needing thoughts to be different in order to act. You have a choice. Act from discipline, not from belief. Your mind will say, "Wait." Your mind will say, "You're tired." Your mind will say, "You'll fail again." So what? Thoughts are not authority. They are suggestions. Unverified. Unreliable. The disciplined individual does not negotiate with mental noise. They move anyway. This is where mental toughness is built. Not in silence, but in chaos. When fear speaks and you move forward anyway. When doubt appears and you stay consistent anyway. When discomfort shows up and you don't retreat. It's not about eliminating fear. It's about not believing fear's story. You have a choice. Here's a practical rule you must adopt immediately. No thought gets action power without evidence. Feeling insecure is not evidence. Feeling uncomfortable is not evidence. Feeling unmotivated is not evidence. Evidence is behavior. Evidence is repetition. Evidence is results. If your thoughts were accurate, your life would already reflect it. If your thoughts were wise, you wouldn't be stuck. That's the key. Most of your thoughts are recycled reactions from the past. Old fears. Old failures. Old conditioning. They are not insights. They are echoes. And echoes do not deserve obedience. You don't need to feel confident to act. You don't need clarity to move. You don't need certainty to stay disciplined. You only need one skill. Delay belief. Let the thought exist. But don't follow it. Let the emotion rise. But don't obey it. This is emotional control. This is quiet discipline. Every time you don't react, you regain power. Every time you don't believe the thought, you strengthen authority over yourself. You have a choice. Always. Most people ask, is this thought true? Better question. Is this thought useful? If it doesn't move you forward, it doesn't deserve attention. If it weakens your discipline, it gets ignored. This is not suppression. This is leadership. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who decides which thoughts get oxygen. And when you stop believing every thought, your emotions lose control. Your impulses weaken. Your focus sharpens. That's the key. You don't need their permission. Not from society. Not from fear. Not from the voice in your head. You mastered awareness. Now it's time to apply pressure. Chapter 4. Train the observer, not the emotion. Most people try to control their emotions. That's why they fail. They fight anger. They suppress fear. They chase motivation. And they lose every time. Here is the truth you must understand. Emotions are not meant to be controlled. They are meant to be observed. That's the key. When you try to control emotion, you give it power. When you observe emotion, you take power back. You have a choice. Emotion is automatic. Reaction is optional. Most people don't know the difference. They feel something, and they become it. Anger turns into words. Fear turns into avoidance. Discomfort turns into quitting. That is unconscious living. Discipline begins when you separate experience from identity. You are not angry. Anger is present. You are not afraid. Fear is present. You are not lost. Confusion is present. That distance changes everything. The observer is calm. The observer is neutral. The observer does not panic. The observer watches the storm without stepping into it. You don't need their permission. Not from emotion. Not from impulse. Not from habit. Here is where quiet discipline is built. You feel anxiety. You do nothing. You stay still. You feel frustration. You breathe. You stay consistent. You feel the urge to react. You pause. You choose. You have a choice. That's the key. Most people think strength is intensity. Wrong. Strength is restraint. The strongest person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who does not move emotionally. Emotion wants expression. Discipline chooses timing. Emotion wants relief. Discipline chooses direction. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about not letting emotion drive behavior. That's the difference between chaos and control. Here is a practical rule you must adopt. No emotion gets a reaction without observation. Before you speak, observe. Before you act, observe. Before you quit, observe. Observation slows the moment. Slowing the moment creates choice. Most people live fast and regret later. The disciplined individual slows down and dominates later. You have a choice. Emotions rise and fall on their own. If you stop feeding them, they weaken. If you stop reacting, they lose urgency. Anger burns out. Fear dissolves. Impulse fades. But only if you don't chase them. This is why silence is power. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. When you don't react, people reveal themselves. When you don't react, situations clarify. When you don't react, your mind sharpens. That's the key. Your job is not to feel better. Your job is to act better. Feelings will come and go. Discipline stays. You don't need motivation. You need standards. Standards don't care how you feel. Standards don't negotiate with emotion. This is mental toughness. You train the observer every time you pause instead of react. You strengthen it every time you choose silence over expression. You build it every time you act despite discomfort. The observer is like a muscle. Use it or lose it. Most people have never trained it. So emotion runs their life. But once you train the observer, everything shifts. You stop being dragged by moods. You stop being hijacked by impulses. You stop explaining yourself. You don't need their permission. You don't need emotional validation. You don't need to be understood. You need discipline. Here is your daily practice. Notice. Name. Do nothing. Notice the emotion. Name it quietly. Return to the task. No drama. No story. No reaction. That's the key. This is how leaders are built. This is how respect is earned. This is how inner authority is formed. You are no longer ruled by how you feel. You are ruled by what you choose. You have a choice. Always. You trained the observer. Now it's time to remove the fuel. Chapter 5. Starve the ego of attention. The ego feeds on attention. That's its fuel. Praise fuels it. Criticism fuels it. Being noticed fuels it. Most people think ego is confidence. It's not. Ego is dependence. Dependence on approval. Dependence on reaction. Dependence on being seen. That's the trap. You have a choice. That's the key. The moment you crave attention, you surrender control. The moment you need validation, you give others power over your emotional state. And they will use it. Intentionally or not. The ego wants recognition. It wants to be right. It wants to be admired. Discipline wants none of that. Discipline is quiet. Discipline is invisible. Discipline works when no one is watching. You don't need their permission. You don't need applause. You don't need to explain yourself. Here is the hard truth. If you need to be seen, you are easy to manipulate. People can provoke you. People can flatter you. People can distract you. All because your ego is hungry. Starve it. Most emotional reactions are ego reactions. Defensiveness. Over-explaining. Proving. That urge to respond? That's ego. That urge to show your worth? That's ego. That urge to win the argument? That's ego. And ego is expensive. It costs you focus. It costs you energy. It costs you progress. That's the key. Here is a rule the disciplined live by. The less you react, the more power you keep. Silence denies ego fuel. Consistency denies ego drama. Results deny ego arguments. You don't announce moves. You don't justify decisions. You don't chase recognition. You execute. Most people talk their goals to feel important. The disciplined individual stays quiet and builds. Quiet effort compounds. Loud effort leaks. You have a choice. The ego wants comfort. It wants reassurance. It wants certainty. Discipline accepts discomfort. Moves without reassurance. Acts without applause. That's mental toughness. When someone doubts you, stay silent. When someone praises you, stay grounded. When someone criticizes you, stay focused. No spikes. No crashes. This emotional neutrality is strength. Here is your daily practice. When you feel the urge to react, ask one question. Is this ego or discipline? If it's ego, you wait. If it's discipline, you act. That pause is everything. The ego wants immediate relief. Discipline plays long term. You don't need to defend your path. Your results will. You don't need to explain your silence. Your consistency will. You don't need to prove anything. Your life will. That's the key. The strongest people rarely speak about their strength. They let structure do the talking. The ego wants identity. Discipline wants execution. Identity is fragile. Execution is durable. When identity is attacked, ego reacts. When execution is challenged, discipline improves. See the difference? Starving the ego doesn't mean low self-worth. It means self-sufficiency. You stop outsourcing your confidence. You stop chasing mirrors. You stop negotiating your standards. You act because it's right. Not because it's noticed. You have a choice. Every time you don't react, the ego weakens. Every time you stay silent, discipline strengthens. Every time you focus on action, attention loses power. This is quiet dominance. People will feel it. Even if they can't name it. Calm unsettles chaos. Silence unsettles insecurity. Consistency unsettles ego-driven people. You don't need to announce authority. You embody it. Starve the ego long enough and something changes. You stop performing. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You move. That's the key. You trained the observer. You removed emotional reaction. Now you eliminate the final distraction. Chapter 6. Detach from the outcome. Most people fail because they are obsessed with outcomes. They want guarantees. They want certainty. They want control over results. That attachment destroys discipline. Here is the truth you must accept. You control effort. You do not control outcomes. That's the key. The moment you tie your emotional state to results, you lose stability. When things go well, you spike. When things go wrong, you crash. This emotional volatility makes consistency impossible. You have a choice. Outcome obsession creates fear. Fear creates hesitation. Hesitation kills execution. Detached individuals move freely. Attached individuals freeze. Detachment is not apathy. It is precision. You still care. You still aim high. But you do not beg reality for reassurance. You don't need their permission. Not from results. Not from timing. Not from circumstances. Here is where mental toughness is forged. You act because it is correct. Not because it guarantees success. You show up because it is required. Not because it feels rewarding. You stay disciplined because it is who you are. Not because it is paying off yet. That's the key. Most people quit right before momentum arrives. Why? Because they were watching outcomes instead of actions. They look for proof too early. They demand progress before discipline has time to compound. Discipline works quietly. Outcomes lag behind. If you measure too soon, you quit too early. You have a choice. Here is a rule you must adopt immediately. Judge yourself only by execution. Did you act? Did you show up? Did you follow the standard? If yes, the day was a success. Regardless of results. This rewires your nervous system. It removes emotional dependency on external feedback. You become internally stable. Most people say, I'll keep going if I see progress. The disciplines say, I'll keep going because that's the rule. Rules remove emotion. Rules create consistency. Outcome attachment creates anxiety. Detachment creates calm aggression. You move forward without desperation. You adjust without panic. That's control. Failure feels lighter when you expect nothing. Success feels quieter when you don't chase validation. Both are advantages. When you detach, you see clearly. You analyze instead of react. You correct instead of collapse. You have a choice. Attachment makes people rush. Detachment allows patience. Attachment makes people force outcomes. Detachment allows alignment. Forced outcomes break systems. Aligned effort builds them. This is why professionals outperform amateurs. Amateurs want wins. Professionals want process. Process always wins eventually. You don't need motivation. You need tolerance for uncertainty. Uncertainty is where growth happens. Certainty is comfortable and stagnant. Here is your daily practice. Set actions. Ignore outcomes. Repeat. Let results arrive when they are ready. Your job is to remain consistent. No celebration. No despair. Just execution. That's the key. Emotion attached to outcome weakens discipline. Emotion detached from outcome strengthens it. You become harder to shake. Harder to distract. Harder to stop. This is quiet confidence. People will ask how you stay calm. How you keep moving without reassurance. The answer is simple. You stopped asking outcomes for permission. You act. You adjust. You continue. You don't negotiate with uncertainty. You work inside it. You have a choice. When things go wrong, stay steady. When things go right, stay steady. No spikes. No crashes. Consistency beats intensity every time. You starved the ego. Now you starve expectation. With no expectation, there is no disappointment. With no disappointment, there is no quitting. Only progress. That's the key. You detached from emotion. You detached from ego. Now you detach from outcome. What remains is pure discipline. Chapter 7. Build standards that do not negotiate. Most people live by feelings. That is why they are inconsistent. They wake up and ask, "How do I feel?" Then they decide how they will act. That is backwards. Disciplined people live by standards. Standards do not care how you feel. That's the key. A standard is a non-negotiable rule of behavior. It is executed on good days and bad days. It remains in place regardless of mood, outcome, or opinion. You have a choice. If your actions change with emotions, you don't have discipline. You have convenience. Convenience feels good. But it builds nothing. Standards build structure. Structure builds strength. You don't need their permission. Not from emotion. Not from circumstance. Not from your past. Here is the hard truth. What you tolerate becomes your identity. If you tolerate inconsistency, you become inconsistent. If you tolerate excuses, you become weak. If you tolerate laziness, it becomes normal. Standards end tolerance. A standard says, this is what happens, no matter what. No debate. No explanation. No exception. That's the key. Most people create goals. Goals are emotional. Standards create systems. Systems are stable. Goals depend on motivation. Standards depend on rules. Motivation disappears. Rules remain. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. That is not theory. That is reality. You have a choice. Here is how you build standards. Small. Clear. Non-negotiable. Not extreme. Not dramatic. Consistent. A standard might be I train even when I don't feel like it. I don't skip because of mood. I do the minimum, every time. Minimum standards create momentum. Momentum builds identity. Identity becomes self-trust. Self-trust removes hesitation. That's the key. Most people wait to feel ready. Standards remove waiting. You act because it's time. Not because you feel prepared. When standards are in place, decision fatigue disappears. There is nothing to think about. You execute. This is mental freedom. The mind is loud when there are no rules. The mind is quiet when structure exists. Structure silences doubt. You don't need their permission. Not from the voice in your head. Not from fear. Not from uncertainty. Standards protect you from yourself. Here is a rule you must adopt. Never negotiate with your lowest self. The tired version of you. The emotional version. The distracted version. They don't get a vote. The disciplined version makes the rules. And the rules are followed. No exceptions. You have a choice. Every time you follow a standard you didn't feel like following, you grow. Every time you break a standard, you weaken trust with yourself. Self-betrayal is expensive. It creates doubt. It creates hesitation. Standards eliminate self-betrayal. This is how confidence is built. Not through affirmations. Through proof. Proof comes from repetition. You keep promises to yourself. Even small ones. Especially small ones. That's the key. You don't need perfect days. You need consistent ones. Standards turn chaos into routine. Routine into identity. Identity into discipline. This is how you become reliable. Reliable people win long term. Unreliable people stay emotional. You have a choice. Build standards that don't negotiate. Or keep negotiating with excuses. One builds power. The other builds regret. You removed emotion. You removed ego. You removed outcome dependency. Now you install structure. Chapter 8. Embrace the discomfort you avoid. Most people avoid discomfort. That's why they stay the same. They avoid boredom. They avoid effort. They avoid uncertainty. And in doing so, they avoid growth. Here is the truth you must accept. Discomfort is the price of discipline. That's the key. Every meaningful change feels uncomfortable at first. Every upgrade requires friction. Every improvement demands resistance. You have a choice. Run from discomfort and stay predictable. Step into discomfort and become formidable. Most people confuse discomfort with danger. They feel tension and assume something is wrong. That assumption is false. Discomfort is not a warning. It is a signal of expansion. You don't need their permission. Not from fear. Not from habit. Not from comfort. Comfort keeps you soft. Discomfort sharpens you. Here is the rule disciplined people live by. If it feels uncomfortable but correct, you move toward it. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't wait to feel confident. You move while uncomfortable. That's the key. Most people only act when it feels easy. That's why they never change. Growth lives where avoidance ends. You have a choice. Discomfort shows up as boredom. Repetition. Silence. Loneliness. Most people escape these states. They distract. They quit. They seek stimulation. The disciplined individual stays. They stay with boredom. They stay with repetition. They stay with silence. And they grow. This is mental toughness. Discomfort trains patience. Patience builds control. Discomfort trains restraint. Restraint builds power. It's not about suffering. It's about tolerance. Your capacity to tolerate discomfort determines your ceiling. That's the key. Here is your daily practice. When discomfort appears, do not label it as negative. Label it as training. I am training discipline. I am training focus. I am training control. This reframe changes behavior. You stop reacting. You stop escaping. You stay present. Most people quit because they misinterpret discomfort. They think something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. This is the work. You don't need motivation. You need endurance. Endurance beats enthusiasm every time. You have a choice. Discomfort strips excuses. There is no comfort story to hide behind. It reveals who you really are. Weak structure collapses under discomfort. Strong structure adapts. This is why discipline must be built before comfort is removed. Comfort is not evil. But dependence on comfort is. Once comfort controls you, progress stops. That's the key. When you embrace discomfort, fear loses leverage. Fear survives on avoidance. Step forward consistently, and fear fades. You don't eliminate fear. You outgrow it. Discomfort becomes familiar. Familiar becomes neutral. Neutral becomes strength. This is how resilience is built. You stop asking, "How do I feel?" You ask, "What is required?" That shift changes everything. Required actions are rarely comfortable. That's why they work. You have a choice. Every time you choose discomfort over ease, you reinforce discipline. Every time you avoid it, you reinforce weakness. There is no neutral choice. Avoidance compounds. So does courage. This is quiet discipline. No applause. No validation. Just repeated exposure. And exposure builds immunity. The things that once scared you lose power. That's the key. You embraced observation. You embraced silence. You embraced structure. Now you embrace friction. Chapter 9. Choose consistency over intensity. Most people confuse intensity with progress. They believe more emotion means more commitment. That belief destroys long-term discipline. Intensity is loud. Consistency is quiet. That's the key. Intensity burns fast. Consistency compounds slowly. One feels powerful. The other builds power. You have a choice. Most people start strong and fade quickly. They rely on motivation, adrenaline, and excitement. Those things disappear. Consistency survives when emotion is gone. You don't need their permission. Not from mood. Not from energy. Not from inspiration. Here is the truth. What you do consistently defines you. Not what you do once. Not what you do when you feel like it. Repetition builds identity. Identity drives behavior. That's the key. Intensity feels heroic. Consistency feels boring. Boring is reliable. Heroic is unstable. Most people quit when the excitement ends. The disciplined individual continues when it becomes dull. This is where separation happens. Anyone can act intensely for a short period. Few can act consistently over time. That gap is where success lives. You have a choice. Intensity demands perfect conditions. Consistency adapts to imperfect ones. Intensity needs high energy. Consistency works with low energy. Consistency does not negotiate. Here is a rule you must follow. Never miss twice. Missing once is human. Missing twice is a pattern. Patterns shape outcomes. This rule protects momentum. You don't overreact to mistakes. You correct quickly. No drama. No collapse. Just return to standard. That's the key. Consistency is built on minimums, not maximums. Maximum effort is unsustainable. Minimum standards are executable. On low energy days, you do the minimum. On high energy days, you still do the minimum. This removes emotional spikes. You don't chase peak performance. You build reliable performance. Reliability wins. Most people wait for the perfect moment. Consistent people act on schedule. Schedule removes debate. Debate kills action. You have a choice. Intensity is dependent on feeling. Consistency is dependent on structure. Structure beats feeling every time. You don't ask, "Am I motivated?" You ask, "What is scheduled?" Then you execute. This is mental maturity. Consistency turns small actions into unstoppable force. It is slow. It is quiet. It is patient. But it is undefeated. You don't see progress daily. You feel it monthly. You measure it yearly. Those who quit early never experience it. That's the key. Consistency builds trust with yourself. Trust removes hesitation. When you know you'll show up, you stop doubting. Intensity creates emotional highs and lows. Consistency creates stability. Stability creates focus. Focus creates results. You have a choice. Choose consistency when intensity fades. Choose structure when motivation disappears. Choose repetition when boredom appears. That choice changes everything. Most people want fast results. Disciplined people want permanent results. Permanent results require patience. Patience requires consistency. There is no shortcut. You embraced discomfort. Now you embrace duration. Chapter 10. Become unshakable. An unshakable person is not someone without thoughts. It is someone who is no longer controlled by them. That is the difference. Thoughts will come. Doubt will appear. Fear will speak. That never stops. What stops is obedience. You stop obeying every thought as if it were a command. That is freedom. Most people believe strength means eliminating negative thoughts. That is impossible. Strength is refusing to let thoughts decide your actions. That's the key. You don't fight thoughts. You don't argue with them. You don't explain yourself to them. You observe. You detach. You move forward anyway. Unshakable people act before certainty arrives. Certainty is a luxury. Action is a requirement. Waiting to feel ready is how people stay stuck. You move first. Confidence follows. That is how it works. Your mind will lie to protect comfort. It will exaggerate risk. It will invent excuses. Not because it is evil. Because it is designed for survival, not growth. You must lead it. You are not here to be comfortable. You are here to be capable. Capability requires resistance. Thoughts say stop. You say continue. Thoughts say later. You say now. Thoughts say what if. You say regardless. That's the shift. Unshakable does not mean emotionless. It means decisive. You feel fear and move. You feel doubt and act. You feel resistance and execute. Emotion no longer dictates behavior. That is mastery. You stop identifying with mental noise. You stop personalizing inner dialogue. A thought is just a sentence. Not a prophecy. Not an order. You choose what gets obeyed. That's the key. Unshakable people anchor themselves in principles. Not moods. Not opinions. Not circumstances. Principles do not change when feelings fluctuate. You decide in advance who you are. Then you act accordingly. No negotiation. This is how identity is forged. Every time you act despite thought resistance, you weaken its authority. Every time you delay, you strengthen it. Momentum is built through obedience to action, not emotion. You don't need clarity to move. You need commitment. Commitment comes first. Clarity arrives later. Most people reverse this order and fail. You won't. You have trained awareness. You have trained discipline. You have trained consistency. Now you integrate. You become the observer and the executor. Thoughts talk. You act. That is the final form. Unshakable is built in silence. In routine. In repetition. Not in dramatic moments. Daily execution creates mental immunity. The mind learns it no longer controls outcomes. That's the end of inner chaos. You no longer chase peace. You generate stability. Stability creates calm. Calm creates precision. Precision creates results. This is who you are now. Not someone trying to change. Someone who has decided. Decision ends debate. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses. That is the truth. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You are not your thoughts. You never were. The moment you stop believing every thought, you regain control. Awareness creates distance. Distance creates power. Power creates freedom. From this moment forward, observe more. React less. Let your mind speak, but do not let it decide. Your challenge is simple. Today, do not obey every thought. That is where your discipline begins.